Welcome to Money Matters. My name is Jim Butler with Marcum Wealth, and my colleague tonight is Jeff Watkinson of Watkinson Capital Advisors. Welcome, Jeff.
Jim, how you doing today?
Very good. So we have a very interesting guest to get to, and an extremely interesting topic as well. Before we introduce him, however, let's chat for a few moments about an area that I think is often either misunderstood by many people, or really not all that clear, and that's an area that you're involved in on the bond side, municipal bonds, corporates, and so on. So let me just open it to you and ask: do you see where do you see most activity in the bond market from your company's perspective, either within individuals, within institutions, or a little bit of both?
That's a great question, Jim. We've been extremely busy over the last several months because of the moves of the Federal Reserve and higher interest rates, and we're seeing the highest yields in municipal bond in muni land with municipal bonds, highest yields in 18 years.
Wow.
So individuals who we've been talking to, I've been sending the newsletter to for 4 or 5 years now, they read the papers, they read the news, and they can read the headlines that these are the highest yields. Also, the advisors that we work with as a sub-advisor, we purchase municipal bonds, build portfolios. As a sub-advisor, we've been seeing a lot more interest in that realm as well. We did a conference call with an RIA this week in New Jersey. Went very well, and we're seeing both individuals and institutions asking more about municipal bonds because of how high the yields are.
So even though we do not like to date ourselves with regards to when this show airs, certainly we've seen a pickup in interest rates over the past 12 months. Do you and folks at your firm see those rates continuing to increase or moderate, say, over the next 6 to 12 months?
Jim, that's a great question. We do not have a crystal ball. We do not predict the direction of the Federal Reserve. We follow the Federal Reserve. We follow what inflation is month over month. But we're never in a position to say, hey, I think we should wait 6 months and then because the next person I've seen on the news who's right about the direction of interest rates and what level they'll be at will probably be the first person I've
Right.
seen. It's just like trying to predict the stock market. It's next to impossible to time the bond market as well.
But isn't it fair to say that most likely any future increases, regardless of what the Fed does, that the rate of increase is most likely going to slow, and that if we haven't reached a peak with interest rates, we're probably not too far from that, so that things can stabilize both from an interest rate standpoint, inflation, and then from an economic standpoint?
Yes, I would agree with that statement. We've seen the Fed make several rate hikes this year, and everyone wants to know, are we near the top of the rate hike cycle? Do we have inflation under control? I would agree with what you said there. A year ago, for the last 12 years, the path of least resistance was higher rates, and we didn't see it. So again, we're not in the game of predicting the
Right.
future, but I do agree with what you're saying.
Go back to the individual marketplace that we touched on a few moments ago. Where do you see municipal bonds used most widely? And then how about corporates and government bonds? Where do you see them used, again, within an individual portfolio? Do you see them, what do you see in taxable accounts, and then what do you see in tax deferred accounts?
That's a great question. obviously when you look at a corporate bond, all the interest you receive from a corporate bond is taxed as ordinary income. And, a municipal bond, if you're a Pennsylvania resident, for example, and you buy a Philadelphia Housing Authority bond, the interest you receive as a Pennsylvania resident will be triple tax exempt from federal, state, and local tax. So mostly we'll see people buy municipal bonds because of the tax-free income and the safety of the credit, the underlying credits. It's the second safest asset class out there behind U.S. Treasuries.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly in non-qualified accounts, regular brokerage accounts, you'll see tax-exempt bonds. And in an IRA account, a qualified account per se, you'll see more treasuries, more corporates, and even taxable municipal bonds, which is a little known asset class. People think munis, they think tax exempt, but there's a large size supply of taxable municipal bonds as well.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but to ask a direct question, can you give an example of a taxable municipal bond?
A taxable municipal bond it's essentially the interest is taxable. I know there's been, stadium bonds have been taxable. There's no rhyme or reason to whether it's a, road, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, they have taxable municipal bonds and they have tax exempt. It all has to deal with the individual issue and the indenture. But over the last couple of years, when rates were really low, we saw a huge issuance of taxable municipal bonds because rates were so low that municipalities were like, "Hey, we'll go the taxable route."
Right. Yep. Where do you recommend, again, for individual investors, they look to for duration, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, or do you maybe stagger it out over a long period of time, anywhere from 1 to 10 years?
That's a great question as well. Up until this year, there was really no yield 5 years out. Now there is much more yield 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years out. You can get 90% of the yield going out only 15 years. So we're not going out much further than 15 years because we can achieve 90% of the yield available.
Right. Okay. All right. That's actually a good segue to our question. So we have a listener who has written in, actually Nancy Donald from Aston, PA. She's asking the question, Jeff, what factors affect bonds?
Nancy Donald from Aston, welcome. Good question. What factors affect bonds? There's a lot of factors that affect bonds. The biggest, you have to remember when you buy a bond, it's, how the story ends upon purchase. When you're going to get your money back. You're going to know when you're going to get paid a coupon payment and how much that coupon payment will be. One of the biggest factors affecting bonds is credit risk. Will that government, will that corporation, or will that municipality be able to pay you your money back in the future? That's credit risk. That's one of the biggest factors. The other one, which we're experiencing today, the other big one is interest rate movements and the factor of the Federal Reserve. And because the Federal Reserve is committed to fighting inflation, they've raised interest rates this year, and that's affecting the value of current bonds. Like I said earlier, how the story ends. If you hold that bond, your individual bond will mature at par. So that's a factor that affects the current price if you were to sell that bond before the maturity.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. And hopefully, Nancy, that's some insight that can move you forward a little bit. If you have a question, certainly feel free to send it to us. And the best way to do that is to simply copy down what you see in front of you on your screen.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back. Our special guest today is Garrett Sorensen, who is a fellow colleague of mine within the Marcum Wealth team. Welcome, Garrett.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're going to jump into an area that I think a lot of us are excited to learn more about. But maybe as a brief intro, in maybe a few words or a little bit more, can you give a little bit of your background just so people can have that as a perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm originally from Alaska. I joined the Army shortly after high school and college. I spent about 10 years in the Army. During that time, that's where I got really interested in finances and working with people, helping people with their investing, their insurance needs, everything like that. And so after that time in the Army, I finished an MBA in finance and accounting. I became a certified financial planner as well as a certified exit planning advisor. And I've been with Marcum now, helping people here in Nashville, Tennessee with their finances.
Great. Okay. Good intro. So the subject that we're going to touch on today is cryptocurrency. And boy, if there's an area where a small percentage of the population knows enough to be dangerous and the rest of us know nothing and therefore we're less than dangerous. So to start the conversation, Garrett, how would you define cryptocurrency to somebody who doesn't know a whole lot?
Yeah, so cryptocurrency, as soon as you say that term, people are going to have some type of response to it. And the interesting part about that is just how we respond, the biases towards the term as a whole. If I was to describe it to anybody, it's simply just a digital asset that is maintained on the blockchain. And there's a lot of buzzwords in there that I can definitely dive deeper into. But at the end of the day, if you recognize this is nothing more than online digital money, and that the way it's being tracked is a little bit different than the way we currently track our dollar bills that we use now to buy all of our things, it's not too different than what a lot of people are going to be familiar with.
You use the word blockchain. What is blockchain?
Yeah, so what is the blockchain? Just like it sounds, it is a chain of information that is being put together by a computer, really a collection of computers, and it's data. It's these really complex calculations that are bringing in data to track events that are taking place between two parties or whatever it might be that's taking place, whatever it is, whatever that blockchain is designed to track. And that's the benefit of a blockchain is it can do a lot of things. The easiest way for people to really recognize what it is, it's an online ledger. And so I'm a relatively young guy, but I still remember in college when we were learning about ledgers, you had your debits and credits, and you had to track everything on both sides of the ledger. The blockchain is doing the same thing. The only difference is that instead of one person, for instance, me or my company or whoever, the bank or whoever I'm with, having that ledger, it's a digital ledger that's being maintained by a whole lot of people who have a centralized interest in making sure that the information on there is held correctly.
So is that basically in the cloud or on the internet, and you could access blockchain, Jeff could access it, I could access it?
Yes and no. Could you access it? Absolutely. My challenge would be to access it. And of course, on the internet, the way that we use the internet now, the benefit that we have is that things have been simplified for us. So there's websites where I can go out and look at information that is being maintained on the blockchain without, going into the matrix, so to speak, when it comes to what the blockchain actually is. And that's kind of what it looks like. And so, you know, in my research, I always kind of tell everyone, I have a very agnostic view on cryptocurrency and the blockchain and all these things. I love it because it's just such an interesting sense of finance and economics. And so when I was doing my research for this, I looked into how can I become a part of the blockchain? How am I able to be one of these decentralized aspects that's adding information? And it's incredibly passive because in reality, anybody with a strong enough computer, with a powerful enough computer and an internet connection, they can become a part of somebody that's maintaining information on the blockchain. But to that, it is pretty complex. It does take a little bit of, there's a learning curve that comes into it. And then again, the type of technology that you need in order to become a part of it, it is slightly more advanced than what you're going to see just if you go down to your local hardware store or your local technology store and pick up a laptop that we might use for work. So it's a little bit more difficult than that, but there are resources where people can still continue to track information on the blockchain.
Garrett, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Every day when you turn on CNBC or open the Wall Street Journal, you see the value of different cryptocurrencies. And there's obviously been a lot of discussion on how do you value different crypto. And my question to you is, where does the value come from, or how does value derive from these different cryptos?
So value on a cryptocurrency, it's, again, I want to try to relate everything in a way that people are going to understand, because at the end of the day, it's not that different than what we're used to right now. The value, the derivative that's being associated to it can be any number of things. But just like where we see value being taking place in the market today, we can attribute that to things that are taking place within cryptocurrency as well. And cryptocurrencies have different use and functions that provide value to that particular token. There's a specific economics that go on here. They call it tokenomics in a lot of these things, where these tokens are actually implying their own economical aspect of how they function. And so one way to really think about this is, I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. I could go in earnest. I could go and start Garrett Bucks, right? And let's say I start Garrett Bucks and I put it on the blockchain. It's my blockchain that I created to manage my token. And for 7 Garrett Bucks, Jeff, you and Jim could come down to Nashville and exchange those Garrett Bucks to take a shot of Jack Daniels with me, right? And I see Jim's already very excited. He wants to know where he can buy the Garrett Bucks. But in reality, all you're doing is turning your USD into 7 Garrett Bucks. Anybody that's been to Nashville knows that really a shot of Jack Daniels is probably going to cost you about $15 downtown. So it's a pretty good deal here. And you might say, hey, you know what, that's worth it. I'm going to go buy these Garrett Bucks because I want to participate in that value. And then from there, if I could limit the amount that's available, I can limit it based on the amount of Jack Daniels I have, or the amount of people I can fit into my home, or the amount of people I want to see. And that's going to create a derivative in value based on the supply and demand function there. Now, that's a really basic way to consider things when we look at the specific value towards how you can spend it. But what's really interesting about cryptocurrency right now is that we're looking into other aspects of how these values come about. And so thinking even larger on a greater macroeconomic scale, how do banks send transactional figures between one another? And is there a possibility to derive value based on the arbitrage that's taking place in those functions? And then the fact that these are two centralized locations that aren't speaking to each other naturally on a non-artificial aspect. Is there a way that we can create a cryptocurrency that alleviates that, because it is decentralized? Again, another one of those buzzwords. It is decentralized, and it allows these banks to have a shared ledger that tracks and creates trust across what they're doing. And there's value that derives from that today. That's a whole nother way to find value in these tokens. And that's what's actually taking place right now. There's thousands and thousands of different tokens that you can see out there. Some of them, the value is based on nothing more than it has an interesting name or it's related to a cute animal. Others, because they're actually providing real functional value to the economy right now.
So one of the more common cryptos is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin has a value, and that value changes constantly. And that value is determined by the marketplace, Garrett?
So Bitcoin value, that's a little bit more where it's going to be tied more to supply and demand. And then, of course, there is a functionality when it comes to Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin has a lot to say just by being first in the space. And so it has brand recognition that helps it. When people ask what is the value of Bitcoin, it's how people are using it. And then more so, even just at this point right now, the fact that we're talking about Bitcoin, this is the type of publicity that most other coins can't buy. And so that does help with Bitcoin. But when you actually start looking deeper into the basics of Bitcoin, you start to see that there is a supply and demand issue that's going on there. There is a functionality aspect where people are able to actually use money, use Bitcoin as their currency in a lot of places. And that's growing all the time, which is going to help add to the functional process use of Bitcoin. And then the fact that really it is a blockchain that even though it's only functioning its own token right now, really paved the way for that technology and what we're using on the blockchain now, and what is eventually going to start leading us into new ways to use the internet. So Bitcoin's definitely one of those interesting uses, and I think just as the first player in the space, really, that brand recognition really helps with that.
How many different kinds of cryptocurrencies are there? And would part of that answer actually be an infinite number of cryptocurrency?
How many are there today? So I did when I started this research, I remember from the time that I actually started, there was about 7,700 different tokens. And then by the time I was completed, so after about a year really of my research, there was over 10,000 tokens. How many are there today? I don't know. This was about this was in 2020 when I was looking at this. So it could have doubled at this point in time. And how many could there be? In reality, it's infinite. And that's why a lot of the times you'll hear people refer to cryptocurrency as kind of that new .com bubble. It really is that thing where just about everybody in every organization sees an opportunity to make some money off of this. And so everyone's getting their .com name and thinking it's a business. People are starting tokens thinking that it's going to make them rich. And there's going to be really a culling of that, where eventually we're going to get to a point where those that truly derive value and help on an economic basis are potentially going to stay. And those that are just there because they have a crazy name are going to get the rug pulled out from them.
Garrett, I got a question about, now I've been following, and I'd love to hear an update on regulation of crypto with Gary Gensler's SEC. Interested in what's that looking like now, and what do you anticipate, and how should we read it?
So this is one of those things, and when we look at what the SEC going through right now, specifically, there's one of these tokens, XRP. It's from the Ripple company. Depending on the side that you really stand on is going to determine where we think that's going to go. And this has been going on for a few years now. Those that are XRP diehards and truly think that token is going to be the gold standard of cryptocurrency, they think they've got it in the bag. They think it's going to be handed to them. Those that really understand that the SEC is a hard person to fight, and it's even harder in that sense to win against the SEC. There's going to be some type of ruling that's going to come across from this. Where that leads crypto in going into the next few years is what I think is going to be the most interesting part of this. And so the XRP case with the SEC is one that's going to really set, or has the potential to set, a precedence for tokens and for these cryptocurrencies. But how that's going to play out, where that's going to go, we might still be a few years away from really understanding. And then the regulation that's going to continue on from there, I think it's just square one. It's really just the first building block that we're going to have when it comes to these regulators talking about how they're going to start implementing aspects and fail-safes over crypto.
Garrett, I've heard the term Web3. And is that something that in any way is connected to the future of regulation, or is that just a different aspect, say, within the blockchain, or how does that relate?
Web3 is, yes, I like to think that cryptocurrency, really the blockchain, is what set the stage for Web3 to be kind of ushered in. And so when you think about the internet as it is today, I mean, I remember, if you think about even just the first level of the internet, the first level of the internet being maybe in the 60s or the 70s, these giant rooms filled with these supercomputers that were processing hundreds of a byte of a megabyte at that point in time. And somebody saying, hey, if I could connect this computer to that computer, and then that computer to another computer, and then maybe 4 or 5 other computers, I can have a web of information, right? And this is what started the process, the idea of the first generation of the web, or the internet as it is. And that moves us into Web 2, where now it was, hey, instead of just these computers, what if we can connect every computer in the world? What if we had a worldwide web of information? And that's where we see the internet now. And I'm sure you guys remember the first time you guys were using the internet. I sure do. And it was nothing like it is right now. I mean, even for us three, we're all in different parts of the country having a conversation about a digital currency, money that we can spend online. And if back in 1996, everyone would have thought we were crazy, and we would have had to put on our tinfoil hats to have that conversation. And so Web3 really, it is still very speculative right now, just like a lot of the things that come into this. But where we move into Web3 is really just the integration of using blockchain technology, and what blockchain technology could eventually evolve into. And then from there, how it integrates with our lives as a whole. So Web 2 is this, it's the information that we see on the screen. Web 3 might be a little bit more of the process of, can I look outside and my window here is displaying the weather out there? Not because it's on there, but because I've got some type of wearable technology, glasses, contacts, or maybe even Elon Musk would say a microchip in my brain that is able to project that and allow me to see it. And when I'm walking around outside, I could be walking and have a conversation with my wife, who is not even there, because but I can see her as if she is, because it's fully integrated in this process. So that's the idea behind Web3. That's the idea behind the technology, and how we can use the blockchain and these the stacks of this new information that we have available to us in a new way. But where will it take us in the next couple of years? I think it's very exciting. I think it's one of those things and it's why I like having this conversation, is because the more people, the more information that people can get about this, and really remove their personal bias about cryptocurrency or the blockchain or anything like that, they can start to see how exciting the technology is for us to use and really be integrating into the future.
So Garrett, you mentioned something as far as what you've done personally over the past several years, and that is, through your research, you've become a student. And so if there's a takeaway for any of us and our listeners from this, is to, do some research. We have the Web 2 and the internet, and it's so easy today to look up information and to become knowledgeable. And there's probably, it's just an unlimited amount of information to look at to understand what is crypto and what the future is. So really fascinating topic. Appreciate your insight very much. Hopefully we've kind of laid the groundwork for many of our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you've also found this to be useful. Our next show is going to be with Maria Maccicini, who's the CEO of Innovius Bio. That name may sound familiar. They're involved with research in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative disorders. Certainly something that's also part of the unfortunate side of our lives. So thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, we're here to answer questions and to let you know that your money matters to us.